pull box used exclusively for vertical conductor support, without any taps or splices, does not need to be accessible. The primary purpose of a pull box is to facilitate the pulling of conductors through long conduit runs or around bends where the pulling tension might exceed the allowable limits for the conductor size and type. In situations where conductors are run vertically, the weight of the conductors themselves can create significant strain on the insulation and the conductors. Therefore, intermediate support is often required to prevent damage and ensure the longevity and safety of the electrical system. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, provides guidelines on how to support vertical conductors. These guidelines typically involve the use of support bushings or other approved methods to secure the conductors at specific intervals. The NEC does not mandate that a pull box used only for this type of support be readily accessible, provided there are no other connections or splices within the box. Accessibility becomes a critical factor when the pull box contains splices, taps, or other electrical connections that might require periodic inspection, maintenance, or repair. In such cases, the NEC requires that the pull box be installed in a location that allows for easy access by qualified personnel. This is to ensure that any potential issues can be quickly identified and addressed, minimizing the risk of electrical hazards. However, when the pull box serves solely as a point of support for the vertical conductors, the risk of needing to access the box for maintenance is significantly reduced. The support bushings are designed to provide long-term, reliable support without requiring frequent adjustments or repairs. As long as the installation is performed correctly and the conductors are properly secured, there is typically no need to access the pull box unless there is a major alteration to the electrical system. It is important to differentiate between a pull box used solely for support and a pull box that also functions as a junction box. A junction box is used to connect multiple conductors together, creating electrical circuits. These connections can be made using various methods, such as wire connectors, terminal blocks, or soldering. Because these connections are potential points of failure, the NEC requires that junction boxes be accessible to allow for inspection and maintenance. The accessibility requirement ensures that any loose connections, corrosion, or other issues can be identified and corrected before they lead to more serious problems such as overheating or electrical fires. In contrast, a pull box used only for support does not contain any electrical connections. The conductors pass through the box without being spliced or tapped. The only function of the box is to provide a physical enclosure for the support bushings and to protect the conductors from damage. Because there are no electrical connections within the box, the risk of needing to access it for maintenance is greatly reduced. Therefore, the NEC does not require that it be readily accessible. It is also important to consider the location of the pull box when determining whether it needs to be accessible. If the pull box is located in an area that is difficult to reach, such as high up on a wall or in a confined space, it may be more practical to install it in a way that allows for easy access. This is particularly true if there is any possibility that the box might need to be accessed in the future, even if it is only for inspection purposes. However, if the pull box is located in an area that is easily accessible, such as at floor level or in an open space, there is less need to worry about accessibility. In these cases, the box can be installed in a way that is most convenient and cost-effective, without compromising safety. The decision of whether or not to make a pull box accessible should also take into account the specific requirements of the local electrical code. While the NEC provides a general framework for electrical safety, local codes may have additional requirements or restrictions. It is important to consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector to ensure that the installation complies with all applicable regulations. Some local codes may require that all pull boxes be accessible, regardless of their function. Others may allow for exceptions in certain situations, such as when the pull box is used solely for support and is located in an area that is not subject to frequent traffic or maintenance. To summarize, a pull box used only for vertical conductor support, without any taps or splices, does not generally need to be accessible according to the NEC. However, It is important to consider the specific requirements of the local electrical code and to consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector to ensure that the installation complies with all applicable regulations. The primary considerations when determining whether a pull box needs to be accessible are the presence of electrical connections, the location of the box, and the requirements of the local electrical code. If the pull box contains splices or taps, it must be accessible. If the pull box is located in an area that is difficult to reach, it may be more practical to make it accessible. And if the local electrical code requires that all pull boxes be accessible, then that requirement must be followed. Ultimately, the goal is to ensure the safety and reliability of the electrical system. By following the guidelines of the NEC and the local electrical code, and by consulting with qualified professionals, it is possible to install pull boxes in a way that is both safe and convenient. Furthermore, it is always a good idea to document the location and purpose of all pull boxes in the electrical system. This documentation can be helpful for future maintenance and repairs, and it can also make it easier to identify potential problems before they become serious. The documentation should include information about the size and type of conductors, the type of support bushings used, and the location of the pull box within the building. It is also a good idea to take photographs of the installation before the pull box is covered up. These photographs can be helpful for future reference, and they can also be used to verify that the installation was performed correctly. In addition to the NEC and the local electrical code, there are other resources that can provide guidance on the installation of pull boxes and vertical conductor support. These resources include industry standards, manufacturers' instructions, and training courses. By taking advantage of these resources, it is possible to ensure that the installation is performed correctly and that the electrical system is safe and reliable. Here's a more detailed breakdown of factors to consider. Firstly, the National Electrical Code, or NEC, defines accessible as admitting close approach not guarded by locked doors, elevation, or other permanent means. Accessible, as applied to wiring methods, means capable of being removed or exposed without damaging the building structure or finish, or not permanently closed in by the structure or finish of the building. Secondly, think about the specific application. The question specifies that the pull box is used only for vertical conductor support and contains no taps, splices, or other electrical connections. The support is provided by a bushing. Thirdly, the NEC generally requires accessibility for electrical equipment to allow for inspection, maintenance, and repair. However, this requirement is typically focused on equipment that has components prone to failure or that requires periodic maintenance, such as junction boxes containing splices or equipment with moving parts. Fourthly, since the pull box in question contains only a support bushing and no electrical connections, the risk of failure or the need for maintenance is significantly reduced. The support bushing itself is a passive component and is not likely to require frequent inspection or replacement. Fifthly, consider the practical implications. Requiring accessibility for every pull box, regardless of its function, could add unnecessary cost and complexity to electrical installations. In some cases, it might be difficult or impossible to provide access without compromising the structural integrity of the building or creating safety hazards. Sixthly, refer to specific NEC sections related to conductor support and pull box requirements. While the NEC does not explicitly state that pull boxes used solely for vertical conductor support do not need to be accessible, the absence of such a requirement, combined with a reduced risk of failure, suggests that accessibility is not mandatory in this specific scenario. Seventhly, be aware that local electrical codes may have more stringent requirements than the NEC. It is always important to check with the local authority having jurisdiction to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations. Eighthly, document the installation thoroughly. Even if accessibility is not required, it is good practice to document the location and purpose of the pull box in the electrical system drawings. This information can be helpful for future maintenance or modifications. Ninthly, consider future needs. While the pull box is currently used only for conductor support, there is a possibility that it might be used for other purposes in the future. If there is a reasonable likelihood that the pull box will be used for splices or taps at some point, it might be prudent to make it accessible from the outset. Tenthly, always prioritize safety. Even if the NEC and local codes do not require accessibility, consider whether accessibility would enhance the safety of the electrical system. If there is any doubt, it is generally best to err on the side of caution and make the pull box accessible. In summary, based on the information provided, a pull box used solely for vertical conductor support, without any taps or splices, does not typically need to be accessible. However, it is important to consider local codes, future needs, and safety implications before making a final decision. Always consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations. It is crucial to always reference the latest edition of the NEC and local amendments for the most accurate and up-to-date information. Electrical codes and standards are subject to change, and it is the responsibility of the installer to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations. It is also important to note that the information provided here is for general guidance only and should not be considered a substitute for professional advice. Electrical work can be dangerous, and it should only be performed by qualified personnel who are familiar with the NEC and local electrical codes.